आज हम स्टार्ट करेंगे डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट का पार्ट 2। ठीक है। इन ए जियोलॉजिकल स्टडी द एंगल बिटवीन द लाइन in an inclined plane and the horizontal in a vertical plane is called as which is plunge. Next, which one of the following parameter is not taken into account in response reduction factor, which is used in determination of seismic force, which is stiffness? Which of the following is incorrect about building back better BBB principle, rebuilding to pre-disaster normal, integrating disaster risk reduction into developmental measures? And next one is the to build more sustainable, safe and resilient community to ensure the impact of disaster on built environment. Hence, A and D is the correct, which is rebuilding to pre-disaster normal and to ensure the impact of disaster on built environment. Arranging the preventive measures on priority during flood. A. Do not walk through waterland drive in flooded area. B. Turn off utilities switch. Listen to radio, TV, get correct information and obey order of the government. D. Ensure your home, move essentials to upper floor and shift to the safer place. Hence, C. Listen to the radio, TV, get correct information, obey order to the government. And next one is the turn off utility switch off. ठीक है. Next D. Secure your home, move essential to upper floor and shift to safer place. And next one is do not walk through waterland drive in flooded area. ठीक है. Given below are two statement. One is the labeled as assertion and other is labeled as reasoning. Assertion: disaster preparedness, disaster mitigation help in reduce the damage and loss caused due to disaster reason. Response and recovery help the affected people and stop the disaster from the occurring again. So hence, and the correct answer is both statement is correct and reason is the correct explanation of assertion. Which what kind of system need to be developed for implementation during the reconstruction and recovery phase, which is system for providing psycho-social support and trauma counseling. CBRN is type of human-made disaster. How many disasters are identified by the high-powered community? HPC is 31. The point inside the earth from which the seismic wave originates is called epicenter. In the context of earthquake are the fastest seismic wave, P waves. The magnitude of the earthquake is measured on the scale which is known as Richter scale. Flood takes place within the shortest span of time, flash flood. Describe the situation of extreme flood. L is greater than HFL. In the Antarctic Ocean, cyclone is known as hurricane. The central part of cyclone is known as it I, where the pressure is the lowest and the temperature is the highest. Only active volcano in India, volcano in Barren Island. The shear strength of the slope material decrease with the increase in slope. The slope movement occur when driving force is greater than the resisting force. In the context of drought, an area used is said to experience a severe drought situation. Rainfall deficiency exceed 50%. The tropical cyclone do not develop near the equator because weak Coriolis force. Percentage of India is prone to cyclone is, ये अभी दिया नहीं, आगे कहीं क्वेश्चन में दिया होगा. व्हाट परसेंटेज ऑफ इंडिया इज प्रोन ऑफ फ्लड विच 2%. व्हाट परसेंट ऑफ कल्टिवेबल एरिया इन इंडिया इज prone to drought is 68%. A series of terror attacks took place in Mumbai in the November of which year? 2008. What is the purpose of emergency medicine triage, which is the to prioritize patient care based on the security of the condition, seriousity of the condition, I think होगा. Which international organization is responsible for implementing the Sendai Framework 2015-2030? The United Nations of Office the Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. Which of the following is not a component of GIS framework, which is disaster response and recovery? Which phase of disaster management cycle is gender sensitivities response? SO, SOP stand for standard operating procedure. Which of the following is a good to contain the quick spreading of oil pollution, which is boom? Given below are two statements. Statement 1, mitigation and preparedness are phase of disaster cycle. In my statement 2, response and recovery are the phase of disaster cycle. Hence, both statements are correct. Next one, who is the heading the Static Disaster Management Authority, which is the Chief Minister? Build Back Better triple B is used in disaster management in presence of reconstruction. Risk mitigation methods such as constructing retaining wall and surface drainage control work are associated with which disaster? So landslide. At which stage of disaster management cycle would response be the main activity, which is a disaster? Which of the following is a correct order of disaster management cycle, which is disaster response recovery डेवलपमेंट? मैच द फॉलोइंग. ठीक है, तो रिप्रेडेंस मीन्स होता है कि essence of timely and effective early warning response, which means that providing immediate relief and assessment. Recovery, which means that the restoring the infrastructure and service. Mitigation, which is minimize the effect of the, ठीक है, of the disaster. Hence is correct. Policy and legislation as per IS 13921 2016, minimum grade of structure concrete for 20-meter high building in zone 5 shall be M25. Cosmic wave are the wave which is the shorter wavelength and high frequency. Which of the following is true about NIDM? NIDM prepare National Disaster Management Plan. NIDM makes rules and policy related to disaster management. NIDM is mainly responsible for capacity building and disaster management. Or NIDM prepare a study material for various course on disaster management. Hence, C and D is correct. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन देखते हैं. अरेंज द फॉलोइंग चीफ पोजीशन बेस्ड ऑन देयर पोजीशन ऑफ पावर कट evocating disaster management activities in India. NDMA, SDMA, Ministry of Home Affairs, DDMA. Hence CABD is correct sequence. What is the purpose of International Disaster Response Law Rules for and Principle 2007, which is provide legal guidance for disaster response act? A given below the two statement, one is labeled as assertion and other is labeled as reason. Assertion: Disaster Management Act 2005 in invalidates the provision of implementing all disaster management activities of India region. India is a signatory of Central Framework of Action 2015-30 to implement its agenda in the country, which is a both statement is correct, but is sometime it. What is the name of the global agreement under the UNFCCC 2050 to combat climate change, which is the Paris Agreement? According to international guideline, how many categories of rights are in disaster rehabilitation, which is a 4, which impact the assessed during EIA or SEA, hence social, environmental, economic sense, all of the above. Which of the following section of Disaster Management Act 2005 is related to the Constitution of National Disaster Response Force, which is section 44? Which section of Disaster Management Act of India prohibits all form of discrimination based on sex, caste, community or religious? Section 61. Which section of Disaster Management Act of Indian graduates right to life, which is section 21? When was National Disaster Management Authority formed, which is 2005? Disaster Management Act was made effective from December 2005. In disaster management, non-structural mitigation involved, which is a community awareness and education program. In the context of disaster management, what is defined as the capacity developed by organization to effectively anticipate, respond to, and recover from impact of disaster event which a predominance. Consider the following statement. The National Disaster Management Act was enacted in 2005. The National Disaster Management Authority is held by Prime Minister. State Disaster Management Activity (SDMA) is held by Chief Minister. Hence, ABC is correct. What is the full form? NDMA, which is the National Disaster Management Authority. Which chapter of the National Disaster Management Act 2005 contain the provision related to the National Institute of Disaster Management? Which chapter? 7. Which chapter of Disaster Management Act 2005 contains the provision related to the National Disaster Response Factor? Which is the chapter 8. Which of the following statement about the National Disaster Management Authority (NDMA) is true? The NDMA statutory body creates under the Disaster Management Act 2005. The chairperson of the NDMA is the Prime Minister of India. Hence, both statement is correct. Which chapter of the Disaster Management Act 2005 deals with the constitution of the National Institute of Disaster Management? Chapter 7. Which chapter of the Disaster Management Act 2005 deals with the constitution of the National Disaster Management Authority? Which chapter 2. Disaster Management Act received the assist of the President of India on which is 23 December 2005. India is India is unanimously chosen as the dash of Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and the Recovery (GFDRR) for the fiscal year 2020. The correct option is a co-chair of the consultative group CG. ठीक है, ये option is the correct. Wait a second. Next is the correct. Which chapter of the Disaster Management Act 2005 is related with District Disaster Management Authority? Which chapter? 4. The National Disaster Management Authority (NDMA), headed by the dash is the apex body for disaster management in India, which is Prime Minister of India. Under which operation India has sent search and rescue team for the National Disaster Relief Fund, medicine, field hospital material equipment to add quick hit to the Turkey and Syria in February 2023, which Operation Dost. The State Disaster Management Authority, a nodal site body for disaster management coordination, has dash at the chairperson, which is the Chief Minister. Which of the following statement about the National Disaster Response Fund (NDRF) is true? The NDRF is audited by the Controller and Auditor General in India. Section 38 of the Disaster Management Act 2005 deal with the establishment of the National Disaster Response Fund and the State Disaster Response Fund, which hence only one is correct. The Disaster Management Act 2005 document mentioned that the national authorities shall recommended guideline for the minimum standard of relief to the provided to person affected by disaster, which shall include which is not including the guideline, which is the offer of the job to member of the decreased family. Where are the headquarters of National Disaster Management Authority, which is New Delhi? In which zone of earthquake map the Gandhinagar district fall, which is 3rd zone? Disaster management include migration, reconstruction, rehabilitation, hence 1 to all is the correct. Which factor is not considered in the design of earthquake resistance structure material strength? The highest magnitude of earthquake record on the earth till 2019 assigned to which is a 1960 Chilean earthquake. Read the following about the earthquake proofing. First, earthquake proofing is a home is a complex and often costly endeavor. And next one is the either or. However, taking the time and money to earthquake proof at home is essential to ensuring its safety and security during a seismic event. Hence, neither one or nor B is correct. Match the following. ठीक है, तो आपको पता है कि चेन्नई फूड जो है कि आपका 2000 चेन्नई फ्लड है, सॉरी फूड लिखा हुआ है, फ्लड लिखा हुआ, ठीक। थर्ड 2015 में आया था। मुंबई फ्लड आपका जो आया था 2005 में, और उत्तराखंड फ्लड जो आया था आपका तो 2018, और कश्मीर फ्लड 2014। हेंस थर्ड थर्ड फोर्थ टू वन, थर्ड फोर्थ टू वन, हेंस डी इज करेक्ट ऑप्शन। नेक्स्ट, match the following. Temporal convection, which is correct answer is telecommunication. Paris Agreement, अभी just हमने क्वेश्चन climate change से related था. Sanitary regulation, which is a public health response. Sanjay framework, which is a disaster risk management. Hence 4 4 1 4 1 2 3, ठीक है. Hence C is correct option. Next question देखते हैं. What is the correct technique for administrating CPR, which is the administrator chest compression, and the ratio of breath is the ratio of 30:2, ठीक है. Which ministry is government India coordinate all aspect of disaster management in India? Home Ministry. IPCC stand for, which is the intergovernmental panel on the climate change. Which of the following of legal framework lays down on the institutional and coordination mechanism for disaster management? India Disaster Management Act 2005. Which central regulation zone CRZ deals with Andaman and Nicobar, Lakshadweep and other islands, which is a CRZ4? Which of the following is responsible for earthquake monitoring in India, which is IMD, Indian Meteorological Department? NDRF is a specialized force for special response in a threatening situation, comprised of which is 13 battalion. In a draft area, which chemical is not used for facilitating artificial rain, which is ammonium chloride? In which of the following state the coastal erosion is more than any other state, which is Kerala? Which ministry is responsible for disaster management in India, which is the Home Ministry? Which is the apex institutional body disaster management in India, which is NDMA? Which disaster promoted in Intact Disaster Management Act in India, which is tsunami? What does the word resilience mean in the context of disaster management? Disaster management, which is the ability of community to resist the effect of disaster. National Disaster Response Force NDRF work under which Ministry of Central Government, which is the Home Ministry? Next question देखते हैं. In exam pointers view से important indirect economic losses are intangible, which is MDG 7. Ensured environmental sustainability. Demography is the derived from Greek word demography, analyze the trend in the distribution of gender. The first legally binding document, the United Convention on the Right of the Child, was adopted in 1989. The second and third tier cities are even more at the risk of climate related impact. This is due to lack of revenge. Disaster is termed as the urban disaster when it strikes in an urban area. Which is the most commonly occurring disaster throughout the world? Flood. Which was the deadliest disaster in the earth? 2021 earthquake. Which country is the worst affected by flood globally? China. In which city of National Institute of Disaster Management situated New Delhi? The State Disaster Management Authority SDMA Delhi is held by Lieutenant Governor. The Disaster Management Act was enacted by 2005. Which organization is the apex authority of managing disaster in India and DMA? The first National Disaster Management Plan of India was released by Narendra Modi. The National Disaster Management Authority comes under which Ministry of Home Affairs? All activities related to disaster management can be divided into three phases. Which is the nodal agency of early warning of the tsunamis? INCOIS. Immigration means to minimize the adverse impact of hazard. Mitigation means in recovery include reconstruction, rehabilitation. First responder during a disaster government. As per the high powered disaster management community report 2001, in term of vulnerability and 1L2 type indicate manageability with a resource at which is a state level. Which of the following region of India does not comes under the zone of high seismic intensity? Karnataka Plateau. The northern western region of the Indian subcontinent is susceptible to earthquake activity because of Plate tectonic activity. Which of the following is region of India comes under general probability of earthquake, which is a southeast Rajasthan. The most flood affected state of India, which is a Bihar. Which one of the following is the only active volcano in India territory, which is a barren island? The National Flood Control Program (NFCP) are for flood control in India launched in year which is 1954. Which of the most landslide prone area in India, which is the Himalayas and northern eastern hill? Which of the following states is are true about the Indian Meteorological Department? In the year 1975, the government of India established the Indian Meteorological Department. The headquarters of the Indian Meteorological Department is located in New Delhi, and only two is correct. Which of the following activities is not taken up in pre-disaster management, which is the government prepare alternate safe place for stay? Disaster impact. ठीक है, अगला देखते हैं. The damping value of taken into account for the seismic analysis of reinforced concrete build according to IS 1893/2016 is 5% of critical damping. IS 1893 Part 3 2014 deal with the criteria for earthquake resistant design of structure for bridge and retaining walls. Why may response spectrum be adjusted for different seismic design category to accommodate different seismic hazard level and building importance across location? The impact of disaster are indicated. Answer not given. Reading the following about effects of earthquake on building. When a building is experience earthquake and ground shaking occurs, the base of the building moves with the ground shaking. However, the roof movement could be different from that base of the structure, and both is correct. LDIR, which is based on the for forest area. INSAR, which is based on ground deformation. DEM which is the correct for topography. IN said, which is a cyclone. Hence, correct answer is the C. Match the following GIS. So GIS, which is used for flood hazard zone. Thermal, which is used for wildfire. Multispectral imagery, which is used for the topography, and the LIDAR, which is coastal erosion. Hence correct option, which is the third one, 2 4. ठीक है, hence C and D, because ये 2 और 4 दोनों के लिए यूज कर और LDR भी दोनों के लिए आप यूज कर सकते हैं. C and D both are correct. Which of the following correct about effect of climate on coastal area? Reduce oxygen level, increase coastal flood and erosion, hence sea level rises. ठीक है, तो hence correct option is B and D only. Which of the following is correct about physical rehabilitation? Relocation, physical rehabilitation and infrastructure, rehabilitation of women, elderly and children, psychological rehabilitation. Hence A, B, C is the correct. Hence A, B, C, which is C is correct. Which of the following as example of post-disaster response measure? Develop evacuation plan, conducting disaster drill, provide emergency shelter, provide specific aid to maintain life and health, mapping vulnerable areas. Hence C and D is correct. Next question देखते हैं. Statement where relief and rehabilitation are important and integral components of disaster recovery. Statement of relief and rehabilitation effort should only be provided by state and union governments, and statement 1 is true and statement 2 is incorrect. Given below statement 1, physical support of the aftermath of disaster is not an important component of disaster response. Statement 2, trauma stress management is only necessary for disaster survivors who have experienced physical injury, and both statements are correct. B is correct. एग्जाम पॉइंट व्यू से इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट देख लेते हैं. डेवलपमेंट कैन इंक्रीज वर्नेबिलिटी एंड रिड्यूस वर्नेबिलिटी अकॉर्डिंग टू NDMP. विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग हैज नॉट ए कंपोनेंट ऑफ रिकवरी फ्रेमवर्क? रीडेवलपमेंट प्लानिंग. द UN General Assembly set up the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development in which year 1995. How many sustainable development goals are related to disaster risk reduction? 10. The principle of build back better can be applicable during which phase of disaster management? Reconstruction. Statement 1. The basic responsibility in India to undertake rescue, relief, rehabilitation measure in event of natural disaster lie with the state government. Statement 2. In the event of disaster, union government provide only supportive role in the term of physical and financial resource to state government. Hence, both statements are true. Next question देखते हैं. Arrange the sequence of cyclone chronological in ascending order. Hence A and then होगा हम्पिन टी इस पीस और फिर then आपका हो जाएगा B और फिर ये तो hence B is correct option. How much of the Great Barrier of Reef in Australia estimated to have lost in 1992 climate change, which is one half? According to IPCC, what is the estimated rise in global temperature for next 20 years, which is around 1.5 degrees centigrade? Which social science perspective view disaster as an opportunity for social change and transform action, which is a post-modernized? Which of the following sustainable goal aim to promote gender equality and empower women, which is goal 5? Which of the following is key provision of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, which is the requirement of development countries to provide financial and technical support of developing countries for climate action? Which of the following is a sustainable development goal aim to reduce the number of people affected by disaster and increase the resilience and adaptive capacity of communities to disaster? Hence, which is a goal 13. Yeah. Which pandemic result in the highest number of deaths in the world, which is a Spanish flu? Which sustainable development goal SDG is related to ensure the healthy lives and promote well, which is SDG goal 3? Which of the following is an example of health issue that may rise in the aftermath of disaster, which is post traumatic stress disorder? Which natural hazard caused the most death worldwide according to Global Risk Index, with earthquake? According to Great Data 2015, 90% of recorded major disasters caused by natural hazard from 1995 to 2015 are linked to, which is linked to weather and climates. The condition for disaster resilient infrastructure is the international coalition of countries, United Nations agency, multilateral development bank of private sector and academic institutions that aims to promote disaster resilient infrastructure, proposed by which Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India. Sandhi framework is successor instrument to be, which is a HIGO framework for action. Which of the following statement is are true for vibration caused during an earthquake? Surface wave include the P wave and S wave. P wave travel faster than S wave, hence only 2 is correct. Which of the following is not a factor affect earthquake intensity? Which is the correct option? Is the I think correct is A. The time of the day of the earthquake occurs. So it is correct. Next, which of the following earthquake waves travels through the earthquake's mantle but cannot pass through the earthquake liquid outer core? Hence only 2 is correct. P wave, S wave, hence only 2 is correct. ठीक है, ये आपका only 2 is correct option. Which of the following is not a rescue and relief operation during disaster, which is preparing their vulnerability? And ये आपका है vulnerability zooming, I think है, ठीक है, zooming map. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन देखते हैं. जोनिंग है, ठीक है, JONING. Test should involve rehabilitation and recovery of victim with post disaster operation. Next one, which of the following is not a measure that government takes the preventive minimum due to flood, which is the correct term, deforestation? Which are the linked ecosystem? Desert, ocean, wetland, or small land? Hence A, C, and D is the correct. In which of the following terrain a dam can be constructed with a hard rock? The Ebola disease originated from which of the following country, which is a Congo? The pollution study, which of the following method is used, which is a resistive method? Which of the following geophysical method dam leakage is found out, which is spontaneous potential? Which of the following is highly endangered species in the world, which is a great Indian bastard? Which is the not the advantage of database management system, which is the data complexity? How many goals are in visit by human to achieve sustainable development goal SDG by 2017? हमारा यहाँ पे डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट कंप्लीट हो जाता है. नेक्स्ट वीडियो में एथिक्स एंड वैल्यूज़ इन इंजीनियरिंग प्रोफेशन हम कवर करेंगे. थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग दिस वीडियो. प्लीज़ लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब द चैनल.